What's going on? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Oh my gosh, I'm knocking my necklace. This morning, we're going live with one of the most extraordinary people on Facebook. Can I say that? Can I say one of the most extraordinary leaders in homeschooling altogether? Well, Catherine, I am so excited that you're here this morning. We are live right now. For me, I need to be able to see me, and I can't see me. Um, but that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and get started. And I'm really glad you're here today because a lot of families don't even know that you're a resource for us. They don't even know the capacity that you carry, and they don't have a clue how much of a blessing it is to have someone like you with your experience, expertise, and also dedication to education. It's very beautiful to me when I find people who get excited about creating things for education, who get excited about being in front of all children, not just their own, right?
Yeah,
Like, so that to me is like, it aligns with my own personal view on global education and connecting the African diaspora around the world. So today, I'd like for you to just tell us a little bit about who you are for the families who don't know you. Give us an introduction, and then we'll jump into some questions and talk a little bit about what you're currently working on, and then what you see in the future for yourself.
sure. Gosh. So again, my name is Dr. Catherine Quinlan. Of course, we go with Catherine here. Kalecia and I have known each other for some time with homeschooling. So who am I? I have been a teacher for 16 years, mainly teaching biology and chemistry and whatever science on high school level, and decided to enter into higher education and academia. My first academic position was at Howard University. Been there for a little over eight years, and now I'm at North Carolina Central University as the Brenda B. Brodie Endowed Chair for Teacher Education and the School of Education. That those are my academic accolades. The ones that are really important to me is being a mom. I'm a mom of now a 13-year-old boy, and he is really what led me into the homeschooling world. When he was at the end of third grade, I decided to start homeschooling him in fourth grade. And so I homeschooled him for 2 years because of I'm sure we'll delve in a little bit into why I chose to homeschool him. And but even before that, I had made it my goal to focus on curricula. So I do bring a different lens and different expectations sometimes into different spaces.
We're so grateful for you. You add so much value just by being present because you have the experience of higher education, right? And I know a lot of our families are intimidated by the thought of even accessing college for their third grader, right? So when they're at that stage, knowing that it's possible, knowing that they have access to resources that are created by someone who's in the university system with education, I think that's just really important. I'm going to jump into my first question just so we can stay on track. For those who are meeting you for the first time, what led you to become a leader in science, education, curriculum design, and STEM advocacy?
Wow. I could tell you there's so many stages. I'm trying to figure out which stage do I go back to. What led me? I think a lot of it is trying to figure out where not just I belong in this world, but then, when you have a child, trying to situate yourself becomes even more important. And I remember, it's funny, I want to tell you this because I don't think I've ever even told anyone or written about it. But when I taught biology, given the resources we have and, how the sciences are framed, I had started thinking about, what it means to understand how we're situated as women, for example. And so when I was teaching my biology courses, I would include movies like Secret of Photo 54, which is about, really, oh my gosh, this is terrible, really understanding the role of Rosalind Franklin in DNA discovery. And then I remember getting all these pictures of, literally ordering when we do our science order of women in STEM. But, of course, or even, Black people in STEM, but then you start to realize, oh, wait a second, these are all white women. Where do I fit in here? And
Mhm.
so when I took my first grad course and trying to understand where we all fit in the grand scheme of things, then I realized, everybody's called for diversity, and as a teacher, not understanding. So what does that mean? What does that mean at all for the curriculum? I'm just not into ceremonies and ceremonially doing things. I don't want things to appear good if they're not. Just show me what it is so I can deal with it to the full extent, whatever that means. And so, that's just one of the small reasons. The next reason that propelled me is realizing that if we don't, as Black people define what it means to be in the curricular space, it will be defined for us on other people's terms. And I like to do things on my own terms. I've never succumbed to the idea that I was a lesser partner in anything that not only involved me, but impacted me or someone like me. And so, I made it a point to just develop that expertise, develop curricular expertise, and so that, you know, I can start creating.
Awesome. All right. Your work has transformed STEM education by making it more culturally representative. What inspired you to dedicate your career to ensuring Black children can see themselves reflected in science?
What inspires me? Goodness, what drives me? I think the most important, well, there's so many things that inspire me. But the most important thing that propels me forward is understanding that our place in this world is really and truly dependent on our symbolic place in the curricula. I think that one of the biggest way to know where we are as a people is to see what people are willing to expose their children to. And science allows you to bring the reality of our lived experiences and narratives into the world in a way that really allows students to carry out deeper inquiries that not only combines who they are, but also combines where we fit in the material world, allows them to explore, science itself, which is hailed as an elite type of and positioned as an elite and an elitist endeavor. And I really do believe that, where we are positioned in the curricula or where we're not positioned in the curricula will always be a mirror to society's openness to include us as an important part of economic development, as an important part of propelling us forward alongside them and determining whether or not we are equal. And so for me, a lot of what has become important in my research is not even so much, is in addition to what I create, but the process of getting there, the rejections along the way, who is it from, right? It exposes to me, whether or not, I'll give you an example. I was reading, an article recently, and every time I read things, one of the reasons I get criticized a lot for not including certain people because I usually can predict. And one of the things this article did was delve into interviewed schools and STEM programs. I had looked into magnet programs, and I can tell because, of my teaching experience, whether something is pretentious, whether something pretends to take us to the next level, but it really doesn't. And I was like, well, lo and behold, yep, you're doing exactly, you were pretty much saying exactly what I knew years ago, right? But of course, it takes time to gather that evidence. And that's just one of it. I mean, I can go into 1,000 reasons. By the way, I'm purposely stopping myself. So if you want me to talk more, I can.
No, you're doing great. You're doing great. I don't want to cut you off because you have such a wealth of knowledge. So I want to make sure that we're getting everything clarity. I mean, there's lots of moms and dads, parents who are watching. They're going to be taking notes. So definitely, I don't want you to hold back anything. My next question is a belief system that I think could be adopted from people who may be coming out of a public school system, transferring into homeschool, or maybe these are homeschool families who have only known traditional school settings, and then they've been taught, or they've been told or put into a belief system that STEM is only for gifted children. So what is your response to the myth that STEM is only for gifted kids or children who naturally excel in math and science?
My gosh. I've always had, I don't want to say the word aversion, but I don't even want to say cringe. The way our society defines what it means to be gifted. I honestly, I wanted my son to be among kids he was inspired with, but the way we situate what it means to be gifted here scares me. Let's just say it. There's a part of me that never really wanted my son to be labeled as such. Because when society labels us, it's often to accomplish whatever bigger goal that is. And so what it means to be gifted takes on a different meaning, takes on a different level of credibility, integrity, accomplishment, depending on what school you're in, depending on who those kids are in that particular gifted class. Society has figured out a way to make sure that not only that is true, but that is communicated to whatever pipeline or pathway that we go down. So I can tell when somebody, oh, you came from a gifted program, what that means. And I did explore for my son to see. And I was like, I did go to, get meetings when I was exploring schools for him, even elementary. And I sat in and I was like, yeah, okay. I don't think so. Because, even I was reading in the article, this is stuff I knew before. You have a STEM gifted program that's not even run by anybody in STEM, right? So how's that going to turn out for you? And I can tell by walking into a space, not only looking at the resources, but the communication. I prepare teachers, I prepare students. I know when people have cognitive challenges. I can tell by talking. I can tell by, I know what your expertise are, because my expertise is to know if you have and help. My expertise is to help you develop expertise. And so the idea of being gifted, I think that I move away from the labels a lot with my son, especially in elementary. I didn't emphasize the grades thing because I knew, even as a classroom teacher, I knew that my student worked hard for their A's and their B's. And so when they left my class with an A or B, they were in a completely different place. I mean, I had a student, well, more than one, return and say, oh, I'm acing everything. And she had a D in my bio class because, those were expectations I had. And she was acing college. So, and then I had students who were, so really giftedness. Don't think of giftedness in terms of, don't need the label, don't need the institutional labels to propel you forward. Because at the end of the day, an A in that gifted program might be a D somewhere else. And that's what I've always told my son. So I looked at readiness for my son very differently. Yeah, he was getting A's in that school, but as a parent who was an educator, I looked at skills and I was like, what's going on? But your skill level, and so I did end up taking him out of the school, educating him up to the level that I wanted him to be. And, it really meant, and educating, most people don't understand education, which is why I'll give you an example of one of the factors that affect education. In a learning space and in cognitive science, one important thing, if you leave this space, with this one thing, I want you to think about this. One thing that impacts our learning is spatial learning. What spatial learning is the ability to not just see in the mind's eye, but the ability to take information in. Think about what it means. Whether it means rotated in your mind or whatever it is. One of the reasons I took my son, I remember I had him in a public school setting and I looked at the toys. I did. I took him out of school. It was like the toys. I was like, what is it? This doesn't even make sense. And then I put him in private at a time, mainly because the toys they were playing with would have helped him learn, right? Because it does matter.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because I've engaged him in different types of spatial learning, one of the more important spatial learning was enrolling him in piano for years. It's not because I expected him to be a great musician, right? But he would have to engage different parts of his mind, not just the motor, the spatial, the thinking, to do several things at the same time, right? Imagine where those keys are when you're playing, right? Along with imagining, doing it. And so I even had my uncle, who is a police band leader, teach him music theory, which he aced, he got a distinguish in. But those were all things that were meant to prepare him for bigger purposes. One of the reasons as a kid I would have him, help me, since he was small, with preparing and cooking and pouring stuff, was to develop a certain level of spatial thinking, which carries over to math. So, and I do STEM with him, not because I think he needs to be in STEM, but because even with meeting a professor, there is something about what you need to get to be in STEM, if it's done right, by the way, that helps you with thinking. I was talking to one of the professors who's, and he's a professor in law. He prepares law students. He was talking about, he's like, yeah, I noticed, the students who do really well, because you have to learn to think about evidence, or a lot of times the students who come with a science background, mainly because of the level of rigor. So what I value it for is something different, mainly because of the level of rigor it comes with, and the way you have to think about evidence apart from yourself, or at least attempt to.
That's good.
And the way you have to prove things, it all carries over to other careers. So if anybody believes that only quote unquote gifted students do well in STEM, then you know for sure it's your evidence, by the way, that they really don't get STEM. It's their evidence that they really aren't practicing the type of investigations and inquiry into STEM. So you know what? Use it as a test. You want to know where somebody is? Let them tell you that only gifted students understand STEM, because one of the approaches I believe that would help students with learning needs is, learning STEM, because I can see them doing very well in STEM because of the type of processes that are involved, the type of, building from individual interest, and for all the reason. So I say that to say, don't allow what people say about things to discourage you. Use it as your indicator. Use it to your advantage. Understand what it is for yourself, and use it to your advantage, because I look for different things. Well, when it comes to educating my son, I don't look for the things that society defines. And I'm happy to answer any questions. It's actually been a vision of mine just to have people ask me questions, but it has led to other open doors. That's a whole other thing,
I love
discussion
it.
I can have. Yeah,
I love it.
for him.
Okay. So you help shape curriculum, including contributing to National Geographic biology textbook that features diverse scientists. Why does representation in curriculum matter, in your opinion?
Wow. Why does it matter versus what I think? Let me come back to the point of why it matters. Well, it matters for a lot of reasons. Representation in the curriculum, and not only represented, but the way it's represented in the curriculum, is always going to be it's always going to mirror the possibilities about where we're headed, which I think is a really important thing that people miss. The importance of a parent as a social schema to our society is truly understated. I can't underscore the importance of a parent, because, and not only by having a Black person sit there. It's amazing, because if you have him sit there and in photographs, then it tells you so much about where we are in society. It tells you so much about whether or not people envision us a part of this success. The people envision us as part of this economic pipeline. So when I push this, I'm pushing for it to be in a real way. I'm pushing for it to be better than what's there. As a matter of fact, the implementation I did with our homeschooling community had some very interesting responses. And it really, and now I tested it on teachers, and now we're going through the data. But I think the really important thing is to see teacher surprise, right? I've even had one reviewer ask me, so how did you prep them, right? Not realizing that the art of asking questions, the motivated thinking and the motivation for asking questions and your goals can impact tremendously the direction of where this goes. And so because I want everyone to succeed, there are questions I ask, right? And there are things I ask, because that's one of the questions that came up with preparing teachers. Teachers asked, how did you know to think of these questions to ask? Well, I've been training myself for years to do this. because my goal is going to be better, which makes it threatening, extremely threatening, because it creates a path. And that's why it's important. It creates a path. My goal is not just representation and ceremonial, but by representation for them to achieve just as much and more. Not just as much, more. I always aim for the best and aim for the highest. When years ago, I had my high school students involved in the NASA SSERV, and I was a teacher mentoring them. And in this program, 10 schools were chosen to with groups of students. And my group was the only 100% underrepresented group. And so out of all the schools that applied, 10 schools are chosen. And then we ended up in the semifinals, which was 4. It brought out a lot of things. That type of representation is so symbolic of, who is supposed to be important, who is supposed to be valued. And so I think of it on that level. And I'm talking to you about it on that level now, but I can talk to you about it on a more micro curriculum level and how I think about it. Maybe that's probably, if we have time, I'm happy to, but I can go on about that part. But it's really important because the type of identity we develop as children will either prepare us for success or not prepare us. The type of identity we develop, whether or not it's grounded in the reality that surrounds other people, it's really important that even as we become successful, to not forget what social schemas are behind, and what is still there. Because we can go back to square one in any second, as we've all seen. And so why representation matter? Representation grounds us in the reality of who we are. But how we're represented, why we're represented, how this is constructed, not just to replicate the pre-existing social schemas, right? Which focuses on symbolic capital, right? Which focuses on, just how you look and how you appear. It has to focus on, let me understand the reality of where we are, and let this take me somewhere. Don't be fooled by things that appear to take you somewhere, because as ceremonial as those are, is as ceremonial as the outcome will be for you. Because one of the things I was reading about is how some of these high-performing STEM programs were really tracking you to prepare for the bigger picture, which is maybe needing low-paying, high-tech, whether it's nurse's aid. Not knocking them, no. I have cousins who are, and those are great fields. But they were funneling students, making them, there was an identity crisis created even for them. When someone was telling you you're great, but you had a hard time passing those tests in the end. Now, I've been on the receiving end, by the way, because people haven't been pleased, even some of the kids, with my approach. I remember years ago when I was, teaching predominantly Black kids, and I realized the math wasn't up to par. I kept them after school. They weren't happy because it was an identity crisis. You're telling these kids they're the best, they're great, but they can't even do the math to pass the physics. So what ended up happening was they took the class away from me, gave it to somebody else. They felt great about themselves. Not one person passed that test. Okay? Well, everybody got what they wanted. They felt good, right? They felt good. The identity crisis did not exist because, God forbid, we have to actually deal with it and what that means. But I'm the kind of person who, I like to take you from here to here, right? I like to take you there. It might be painstakingly, it might be painful to get there. Not everybody wants to get there. Most want to pretend to get there. And so we replicate the same structures that are counterproductive for us. I don't think everybody needs to get there. I mean, in society, we need people in all different levels. But the problem is where we're placed as Black people is always reflective of how we're valued and what we're going to get next, right? It never gets better. And so that's why we have to fight for, not everybody wants to be in STEM. Not everyone needs to be. And that's a conversation I had. And that's why I was reading that article, because I was like, I need to publish this data finally that I took years ago of even students in STEM, at an HBCU saying, yeah, my parents wanted me to, doesn't mean I wanted to. But what this really means is understanding students are getting educated, learning how to think, learning how to make deductions, all the best type of reasoning, value it for what it brings and for what for how it takes you from A to B, because the type of thinking I think will be needed to be successful, especially in the age of AI, because no, that's another. I have very strong opinions because when preparing my child, even my child, for AI does not necessarily mean people are still defining its use and its usefulness. So the AI itself is not in its usefulness. It's just what it. The question is, what is your purpose and what do you want to use it for? And so you have to define your purpose. And those who define that purpose, those who spend time developing that thinking, is who are going to be able to use it more effectively later on, not the ones who are engaging in it right now. And I can go on. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. You're good. All right. I've got one last question before we wrap up. Many homeschool parents worry they're not science people. What are some simple ways families can nurture curiosity and love of STEM at home, even if they don't have a science background?
Home. Wow. A lot of things you can do. I think one, get your kid a really high valuable. So I'll tell you what I use, and it's not because I'll just say what I use. When I was prepare your child in math, because if your child wants to go into STEM later on, one of the challenges, even for white scientists, they end up having to go back and learn math. So when I had my child in STEM, I'm sorry, when I had homeschooled my son, I used Singapore math, right? But only because those books are developed, those books are there for you. Those small books are there for you. And as a parent, you can follow those books. There's a homeschooling version too. Until you get to maybe the middle school. When the middle school, I sent my kid back to public because I knew the requirements for teacher preparation for middle school is different. So I decided to do that. But I was also very strategic in where I wanted him to go and experimenting with stuff. And I think about my choices for schools differently as well. And so far, I'm happy with my choices. But one of the things I did at home was, I got kits for him, and he experimented. Now he likes to cook. Believe it or not, when you're majoring in some universities in chemistry, you know, require students to take a cooking class just so they can develop that spatial language. And I have no doubt that many of the parents who are thinking of STEM are probably doing a lot of this, right? Getting kits for the kids, taking them to museums. But I think the most important thing we forget is they need a good foundation in math. I sent my son to the Russian School of Math. Even when I took him back to school, I kept him in there because they think about math differently. They think of math a little bit the way I grew up thinking of math, because I grew up under the British system and the Common Core and Singapore, kind of Common Core kind of attempts to follow that Singapore and that European way of thinking about math as well. So, and believe it or not, he never took to it, right? He just kind of, and he did the piano, but now he's in middle. I've had some shocking experiences because again, whatever your child experiences is what they're going to go back to later on. So I was surprised. He was invited to join because his friends were in. This is also why I was very strategic in choosing this school, this demographic of students that allows him to see how culture is integrated with success. I didn't want him in a predominantly white school. And so, surprisingly, he is getting involved in this health competition thing. It was like, wow, did not expect that. He's always, your kid oftentimes don't want to do what you're doing, right? Don't want to become you. And like, I wonder if he's going to go in STEM. First she's like, oh, I'm in the business all the time. I'm okay. I'm supporting whatever. But I think parents need to keep STEM in mind for the value it brings. When your kid is involved in reading, in playing with kids, they have to read the stuff. Value it for those. They're growing because they have to read the stuff. And that's developing a type of literacy and informal reading that's often, I think, lacking a lot of times in our school system, the level of the type of, the amount of informal reading. So value it for the skills your kids are developing because they may or may not choose them later on. Okay.
Thank you so much. Okay, so as we're wrapping up, if I'm a homeschool mom and I catch the replay of this and it's a Thursday and I'm extremely stressed out, but I really am interested in reconnecting, and maybe there's a way that I can reach out to Catherine Quinlan and she can support our co-op, or maybe we can get her to come and speak for our classes. What's the best way for our followers and viewers to actually reach back out to you, find you, and maybe see some resources that you have available online right now?
There are a couple ways. They can go to your group. I'm assuming that they'll see it on your Facebook. They can go to your group and they'll have access to me there as well. My website is visibilityinstem.com. So is my YouTube. YouTube at visibilityinstem.com. You'll see video clips. Did test out one curricula and I did put it on the website. I do have it behind my paywall, but I'm always sharing it with people. So, I don't want cost to be a hindrance. So please feel free to email me. I'm actually preparing another implementation for curricula it'll show up in your face group as well as the other DMV face groups that I'm a part of. And I will post those lessons there. Those are free for homeschoolers. So you're always welcome to join and look out for those. And you can message me on Facebook. And I also have my own podcast and I'll give you all the links to that. So there are a lot of ways to this visibility in STEM. There are a lot of ways to contact me. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Facebook.
Yes, you're everywhere. You are everywhere. If you Google, you can find her. Thank you so much, Dr. Catherine Quinlan. I appreciate you. I really want to emphasize that you will be joining us
Yes.
in Washington, D.C. on August the 1st. I'm so excited because we have a powerhouse of men and women who are dedicated to our families and our community and getting them the resources and the information they need to thrive and for their children to thrive. So I'm really grateful for you saying yes to that. You're going to be on a panel speaking about your curriculum. So this is really, really cool. I know that there will be some moms that are going to be building things that are coming to you. And I just want to continue to show gratitude for you saying yes to the vision and the movement. And I look forward to seeing you soon. We're going to be connecting there. And if you're interested in connecting with Dr. Quinlan, you can find her. You can connect with her. You can reach out to me if you can't figure out how to get a hold of her. But she really is available. She's been visible in STEM globally. Truly, she's done everything. Her vision and her mission has reached a global platform, and we want to just share our gratitude and excitement that we have you as a part of our community. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you. And thank you for your vision.
Girl, I'm excited. Thank you. Thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see y'all on the flip side.